Welcome to the Greatest Story Podcast with your hosts,
Zac
and Josh. We are here to discuss and react to some of the greatest stories ever told, even the one about Billy the Goat. We will look at books, movies, video games, and all forms of storytelling to figure out what makes a good story and what are some of the greatest stories.
Yeah, so we have to apologize for editing Zac just kind of butting in.
Plot of Terminator, iRobot's coming to life.
Wow, that's a little scary.
Yeah, but what's going to happen next? I guess we'll find out in the near future. Dun, dun, dun. Something else to figure out in the near future. Zac, have you listened?
You can listen.
Yeah.
You can listen to stories.
Have you consumed, taken in, completely enjoyed, eviscerated any good stories?
I don't know about eviscerated.
One of these things is not like the other.
Yes, I have eviscerated stories. I've destroyed them. No.
Not just the men, but the women and the children too.
Wow, it's been a while since the Star Wars reference, so that's good.
Hey, you gotta sneak them in.
Yep.
Anyways, any good stories?
Yes, so I recently watched Prince of Egypt, the old animated, let's see, that's like back in 2000 or 1998,
Old.
something like that. It's, yeah, it is. I mean...
Did it deliver you?
Dated. Yes. I appreciate it. Yeah, that soundtrack is amazing. Deliver us. Yeah. And I love, one of my favorite ones is actually the one about the plagues. And then the one where they do like the whole like gods rap battle thing, which is super cool.
Is that when the snakes happen?
Yeah, when the snakes are fighting. Yeah. So that's a really good one. But yeah, we were just talking about Prince of Egypt before we started recording, and the cast is so stacked for that movie. It's absolutely insane.
Who knew?
I know.
As a child, I had no idea.
I had no idea.
Honestly, like, just a little aside. As a child, when I was watching this, and, I just assumed it was the same kind of a cast of, like, VeggieTales.
Yeah.
Which I guess if Vischer hears this, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but
you're not Patrick Stewart.
Yes. You're not Val Kilmer or Sandra Bullock or...
Yeah. But I just assumed because we bought it at a Christian bookstore, like, these are Christian.
And then you're like going through and watching, and you're like, wow, Aaron sounds a lot like Jeff Goldblum.
These are A-listers. But yeah. Anyways,
crazy. Yeah, but that's a great movie, and I would love to do an episode on the Prince of Egypt at some point.
Yeah,
I think just from watching it, and I was thinking about the rubric, I think it could possibly be an A or an S tier. So
I have an idea for next season already.
Ooh,
should we spoil it now, or do we just?
I mean, it would be a spoil for me too.
What if we did like Gods and Titans?
Ooh, oh, that would actually be good. We could do like mythology, like even like Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, 300.
300. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Probably
yeah,
only episode.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I don't know, but we could also do the Star Wars. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's
Marvel,
true.
Thor.
Kind of. Yep, Thor. Oh, that's good. I like that a lot.
Anyways, let's keep moving.
Yeah, I like that a lot. If you also like that,
comment.
Go ahead and comment and let us know if you like that theme and what Gods and Titans themed
Percy Jackson.
Yep, books, movies, right? Let us know in the comments. But speaking of people who comment on things, and also, I feel like they do, right?
Keep going.
Okay.
Just keep rolling.
And people that give us support. We appreciate our Pathfinders, and we want to call out specifically Pathfinder Commodore Peggy B and Pathfinder Champion Paige S. But
it's not quite you guys are champs yet. Because when you take a 2-week break for good reasons, stuff happens.
That's right. In your face editing, Zac. We had reasons.
Human reasons.
Yeah. You'll never understand.
Editing, Zac. You as a listener can probably relate to being sick, having a job, maybe having a family,
having to read a book. Yeah,
reading a book on top of it, having jobs that are your real jobs. Anyways, but people that maybe give us hope that this could be kind of, long term.
Like a real job.
We have three new Pathfinder. I don't know.
Pathfinders.
Yeah, Pathfinders.
Yep.
So, welcome to this elevated and vaulted status.
That's right.
Pathfinder Captain Joanna B.
Yep.
And our 2 new Pathfinder cadets, Kirsten and Lauren.
You guys are champs. Yeah.
Bump.
There we go.
Well, Zac, here we are.
Yep.
Another story.
Another story.
What are we talking about today?
Another day, another story. Today we're talking about The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, a classic.
Classic. A complicated classic.
A complicated classic, that's true.
So if we're honest, part of why we're tardy is because this is a book written in a very
different
and particular place and time.
Yep.
So the author is Mark Twain.
Yep.
Was
pseudonym.
Yep. Well, his real name would be Samuel Clemens.
Allegedly.
Mark Twain sounds cooler.
Yep.
I also picture him as Colonel Sanders.
Definitely. Me too. Okay, we will refer to him as Mark Twain / Colonel Sanders for the rest of this episode.
Distributor of crispy fried chicken. But he wrote Huckleberry Finn in 1880s.
Which is a long time ago.
In a very particular place in a galaxy not so far away.
Yep.
And so we're just going to take a second and set some historic context and set the stage. Because this is a book we want to treat with delicacy.
Yep.
Yeah. And intentionality.
Yep.
And you'll probably find out here in a second why. So 1880 comes after a time period in American history called the Reconstruction.
Yep.
And Reconstruction is basically how does a country that was divided in civil war, which the Civil War ended 1865, how does that country come together and put the pieces together after you had millions of men from either side fighting and dying, right? And the casualty toll is pretty catastrophic. It sets the male population back by over 10%. And so imagine 1 out of 10 men that you know are dead. And that's not that's when I say casualty, that's killed in action. So that's not even counting
injured.
Yeah. And so the odds are you also have family members that are coming back disfigured and psychologically broken.
Yep.
And so Reconstruction is a very painful time in American history. And so a topic that should not and cannot be avoided is also the painful history for African Americans in that time period.
Right.
Because, again, you're going from millions of people in slavery, which is just a heinous sin.
Yep.
And now they're free, but they're not necessarily relocated.
Right.
So they're in the same environment, in the same locations.
But given a new title.
Yes. And there are a lot of configurations and variations and efforts to essentially keep status quo.
Yeah.
And if you're an adult, you can figure out what that means.
Yep.
And if you're a kid, you'll probably learn about it in history class one day. But Reconstruction was a very violent time and a great time of suffering that ends, air quotes, in 1877. And I mean, like, this is a time period full of hate groups and strife and domestic terrorism and all sorts of just ugly, nasty. The economy is trying to be rebuilt.
Yep.
And it's just really broken. And Samuel Clemens is Mark Twain, Colonel Sanders, is coming into this time period, right? And he's writing, and he is, in our opinion, I guess to like show some of our hand, he's writing satire to win hearts and minds. So this book you can kind of fit into the same category as To Kill a Mockingbird, Uncle Tom's Cabin to probably a greater extent. But like those are books that need to be treated with sensitivity and sincerity. And so we didn't want to just jump in this frivolously like we do.
Right.
Not that we jump in frivolously, like we pay attention.
Yeah, we take notes and we reflect on things and think about greater themes. But particularly when it comes to issues like slavery or race, we want to be careful not to be flippant in language and usage.
Because this book, I don't think it is very flippant. It might appear flippant on the outside, but if it does, that is an indicator that you need to check your own heart, probably.
Yeah.
But all this to say, the book is set pre-Civil War. I believe when I Google searched it, it's like late 1840s.
Yeah.
And that is essentially the tipping point where the country is going to go into a period of no return.
And it's also taking place in the South. So this is 1840s.
Particularly, was it Arkansas?
Like, Mississippi, Arkansas, a little bit of Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri.
Yeah.
And, if you know anything about history, those are strongholds of Southern culture, which we're not trying to bash that too. And it is worth noting There is a lot of suffering on the southern side post-war as well. And I think Mark Twain is also going to touch on that some as well. Because there's going to be some satirical fingers pointed at ways out of suffering. And so, I guess without further ado, unless there's more you want to add to that.
No, I think that's good.
You want to jump in?
Nope, I think that's good. Let's jump into plot. Clear plot. Number one. I think it's pretty good. We were talking earlier. We can summarize it fairly easily with Huckleberry Finn helps Jim to escape slavery.
Yeah.
Yep. And
he is going to wrestle with that, and part of the wrestling is going to be a bunch of side adventures.
Yep. It very much is like a main quest with a whole bunch of side quests.
Yeah, and some of them are they appear goofy on the outset, but this is where the satire comes in. When you think about it, there's some serious evolution going on, both in plot, and the severity of the plot, in addition to character development, but we're not there yet.
Yep.
So what are some examples of these ridiculous subplots, these side quests?
Yeah, so they end up going down the Mississippi River, which is kind of literally the river is pushing us forward in the plot. But then they keep having to make these stops. So like fog appears and they have to go onto this ship with bandits. And so they have to escape the ship that's being robbed by bandits. They also end up in a town with like a Hatfields versus McCoy, societal
blood
war. Yeah, where these two families just end up shooting at each other. Like there's nothing out of the ordinary. It's your normal Tuesday night.
With Shia LaBeouf. Which, that would fit into a normal Tuesday night.
Yep.
Fighting for your life with Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. So I still think we should do an episode on that as well. So yeah, there's a whole bunch. They meet some con guys, which are super great.
They're my least favorite.
They are great. The Duke and the King, they are just the worst. Like sleazy, I always picture them like balding and like just a bunch of makeup.
What is the traditional, like, what do you call it when you have like comedic relief where one's tall and skinny and the other one's
they do that. Yeah. That's
I know that's a thing.
Yeah, that is a thing. Called. We've talked about that before, I believe.
And that's an old thing.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
It's like R2D2 and C3PO.
Traditional, tall, and skinny.
Editing Zac here.
That's what it'll be.
Editing Zac here. It is called the big and tall trope, or the fat and skinny trope.
Where were we?
The Duke and the King. They are like the tall man, skinny man, or tall man, short, fat guy trope.
Yeah, and so each of these pit stops is an evolution in the journey where a greater part of the plot is Huck has to reconcile freeing Jim.
Yeah. Because that... And I think this is where the book does a really good job. We'll get more of this in Ethical Lesson, but on the surface, we think, well, yeah, freeing Jim is a great thing to do, but for Huck, culturally, that's actually wrong. That is not the thing he's supposed to do.
Like, we grew up in a society where, like, this is out of the question.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, especially in today's day and age, right, like, it's like, so far removed out of the question that it's alien to contemplate like that type of a hierarchy societally. But like if you grew up in it, like, you know, there's the old joke about two fish swimming upstream in water. Old fish swims by and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish say, "What's water?"
Yep.
Right? If you're immersed in a culture, like you are immersed, you don't know what's there. So Huck thinks he's violating everything that's good and whole about his society when he does this. And we see an evolution of him embracing that. But that, again, is an ethical lesson thing that we'll get into. It's also worth... We probably should also mention part of the plot is Huck wrestling with civilization. His dad.
Wrestling with civilization? Like being civilized? Is that what you're talking about? Or
yeah, maybe this will come up later in character development.
I think in character, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the plot. They're trying to get on a journey where Huck's running away.
Yep.
Jim is running away too.
Yep. They're trying to get to Ohio.
By going south.
Well, we didn't say that Huck Finn is that's the only way the river goes, Josh.
Yeah. Turns out.
When you're on a raft, you gotta follow the river.
Yeah.
Gotta get me one of those steamboats.
So it's clear plot.
Yep.
Like it's literally linear.
Yeah, follows the river.
Yeah.
What about clear character arcs?
Oh, I really think this is a good one.
Yep.
Not the greatest one in this book, but
No.
it's a good one.
Yeah.
Do you want Huck or do you want Jim?
I can work with Huck, sure. So Huck starts out at the beginning, and he is kind of going through this growth period. He's been adopted by the widow, who is this kind of wealthy Southern belle character, and she is trying to quote unquote civilize him and basically force him to fit a certain cultural stereotype and be kind of a Southern gentleman figure.
Gentlewoman. Oh, make Huck
no,
fit
make
be a
Huck.
gentleman.
Yeah.
Wow.
She's a gentlewoman,
Yeah.
but yeah, trying
My
to
bad.
make Huck fit this. But Huck Finn doesn't want this. He wants to kind of be in the woods. He wants to do his own thing. He doesn't want anyone telling him what to do, and that becomes a signature part of his character throughout the whole story. Is he does not want people telling him what to do. He wants to make his own decisions. He wants to make his own choices. And so as he goes along, he ends up running away. And while he runs away, he finds Jim. And so they start getting to know one another. And they're both kind of superstitious. And Huck begins to think more about how he actually cares for Jim and starts to eventually come to care for Jim. At first, he likes to play jokes and he likes to kind of do pranks on Jim. And then he grows to realize, oh, actually, I like Jim as a friend and I care for him. And eventually, he realizes, oh, I'm kind of helping Jim escape. And at first what seemed like just a adventure for a kid, now he realizes, oh, I have to actually make a decision. Is this going to be something that I actually commit to, even though culture tells me it's wrong, other people telling me like it's wrong against God, like what do I do? But again, he comes back to, well, I don't want people telling me what to do. And I think this is the right thing. So that's what I'm doing.
And it happens at that moment is a literal crossroads.
Yep.
Like if I remember right, like there's a fork in the river.
Yep.
Which is just beautiful.
Which is
writing.
great writing. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Jim, similarly to Huck, right? This is a time period where education is extremely limited.
Yep.
And with Mark Twain writing backwards into 1840s, it would have been like horrifically limited for African Americans. And so Jim is very superstitious. He's very backwoods, but he's also kind of been conditioned to be very trusting. And so Jim's evolution is becoming more confident in who he is and more confident in the idea that he is in fact a man and that he deserves to be free. And as they go farther down the river, you see him take more of a role and he's putting trust in Huck. But Huck also kind of has to earn that trust as they go. But we also get more complexity to Jim's character. Like we learn that he's actually a father and a husband, and he's running away because he was going to be separated from his family.
Yep.
And his dream is to go make enough money to purchase his family.
Yep.
And so just the farther along you get, the more in confidence he grows, the more adept he is at navigating these. They're written kind of jovially, but if you get under the surface, these are pretty scary circumstances.
Yeah.
Especially like if you're going to run away, right? Like there are points where there are wanted posters. There are points where they're in gunfights. Like there's a lot of like very serious points.
The Duke and the King threaten to like sell them for money. Yeah.
Yeah, like there are runaway slave patrols, which was a real thing. But they have to evade a couple of those.
And it's like Jim and Huck are having to avoid basically an entire culture because anyone who is in these states will turn them back over to the authorities. Yeah. And for Huck, he just goes back to the widow. But for Jim, I mean, he gets punished.
And that is, punished would be severe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not something I want to talk about on air here, but it would be very severe. So those are the two main characters. Like we said, there are plenty of side characters.
But
most of those get their just desserts. They don't necessarily have development.
Yeah.
They're more like mini ethical lessons in and of themselves.
Yes, they are, which maybe we can kind of transition then into.
Yeah, I thought that was good because you were talking about like they have to get out of society.
Yeah.
So transitioning into ethical lesson, one of the ones I love the most right? It is that dialogue that Huck Finn has with himself of, I want to be wild, versus becoming civilized. But in becoming civilized, you're actually surrendering some of your humanity and you're becoming wild and barbaric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I love that because they use things like the Bible, they use things like respect, they use things like table manners and all of that. You're like, oh, it seems like very moral on the surface.
But they're subverted.
The culture that they want him to be civilized to is actually a culture that is devaluing life.
Yeah, which it's worth noting, a very popular thing, especially for slave owners at this point, were things called slave Bibles, where they would take Bibles and they would cut any passage that had to do with freedom, any passage that had to do with like biblical slavery, which normally in the Bible ends up with people getting freed or at the very least getting paid and treated well. All those things were just, they literally would cut them out. And so it's worth noting that when we talk about, oh, the Southerners are using the Bible, they are misrepresenting and misusing.
Yeah, it's things that seem moral, but when you look at it, you're like, oh, actually, this is, like you said, more barbaric and wild than...
Yeah, it's like a veneer of sanctimony.
Yeah.
But in reality, there is nothing very humane about it. Like, it is a society that's built on the precipice of people's labor and suffering.
Yep.
Not in its entirety.
No.
Right? But it's like just this weird historic dialogue where Southern culture has always been more aristocratic and more Londonian.
Yeah.
Is that a phrase?
Yeah.
But it's
you get the idea.
It's highlighted by like former gentle people. Like even the way that part of the country was settled is you have former lords who cannot progress further in England.
Yep.
Because guess what? There is no land.
Yep.
And they immigrate over to the West. Yep. And there is a limit of savagery there where you kill or you be killed, but you go from being a petty lord to being like a mega master, like landlord,
a business lord.
Dude. Like you literally can own the world.
Yeah, like almost mafia level type stuff
in America.
Yeah,
but then you can maintain and reclaim some of your legitimacy as a lord from your roots in England. So like, anyway, I didn't need to go down that path.
Yeah, but
hopefully it was interesting for somebody.
Yeah. That's the idea. So yeah, but like you said earlier, there's all kinds of characters that, as they're kind of being these types or these tropes, they're getting their just desserts, and that's kind of giving us mini ethical lessons. Like we mentioned the Duke and the King earlier. These are two con men that show up with Jim and Huck, and they kind of join their raft, and they almost take over the raft. They're like directing things, and they're practicing their plays, and basically their whole plot line is, we're going to use your raft to go up and down the river, not really up, to go down the river, and we're going to keep conning towns out of all their money.
And it's a commentary on the ridiculousness of society and man.
Yeah, like at one point, one of their shows is famous because they promised this great spectacle, and it is
a spectacle.
Yeah,
they paint
themselves naked.
Colors,
and just like
and prance around on stage.
And everyone and there's an interesting line because it talks about how everyone in the audience knows that they're getting swindled.
But
they don't tell anyone. Yeah, they don't tell anyone, so then they can keep swindling show after show.
Yeah, I think they at one point, don't they even like propagate it? Like they encourage others.
Yeah, they do to like go and see the show, and then once everyone's seen it, then they like go and run them out of town. And
because you don't want to be the only one that fell.
Yeah.
For something that's that loony.
Exactly, and that's kind of I think talking about the culture, right?
Yeah.
Even some people that are like, there's some things that are red flags maybe, but I don't want to be the only one.
Yeah. My friends are doing it, so it's cool. Like
exactly.
Do you want to be the only guy that doesn't jump off the bridge if all your friends jump off? Or
jump off the bridge, guys. That's
blooper reel it is. But to in a smaller extent, right? Like the way they're introduced is, one introduces himself is like the long lost descendant of King of France.
Yeah, he's like, I'm supposed to be the king.
The one that gets beheaded.
Yeah, he's like, I'm King Louis the 19th. And you're like, what?
He's like his 28th son that disappeared.
Yeah.
One, the dates don't line up. But he pretends to be King Louis.
Yep.
And Huck Finn, like there's this moment where he internally says, oh, I know this is not true. Like, he knows he's being swindled. And then the other, or maybe the other guy actually goes first. The Duke goes
Yeah, I think the Duke goes first.
Yeah, so this other guy, the first guy
His
gets...
claim is more moderate.
Yeah, he says he's like, a lord in England. And his
kind of the petty lord thing. Yeah, lost my land.
Got kicked out, but, and he does this, and he says, it would make it better if I could, like, get free labor and put my feet up and do whatever I want. And they take Huck and Jim's beds on the raft, and the other one has to upscale and outdo the other one by saying, well, you're a lord, but I am like the potential king of France. And like, these are hobos.
Yep.
Like, they're literally hobos.
Yep.
And Huck Finn says there's like a point where he like recognizes like, well, I don't want to upset Jim and I don't want to upset them. So like, he just hopes to play along with the absurdity.
Yep.
And hopes it'll go away.
Yep.
And then the town does the same thing.
Yep.
But these guys are also swindling like churches.
Oh, everybody. Yeah.
The generous.
Yep.
And so you can read into a lot.
Yeah,
from,
there's
like,
all kinds of stuff. And the point is, right, you're supposed to, if you don't want to look ridiculous and you go along with everyone else, you actually look more ridiculous. Yes, you actually look more ridiculous than if you just stand up for whatever you're believing in.
And if you share that ridiculousness, you're actually like morally culpable.
Yep.
Which is partially why we have this show in the first place.
Yeah.
Is trying to discern what's good art and what's wisdom.
Right.
That's just good humans pass that along, and what's folly.
Yep.
Like Transformers 3.
The
dark
folly.
side of the moon.
Folly. Go back and see that episode if you want to know why we're hating on Transformers 3.
We don't hate it. We're just, calling a spade a spade.
Sure.
It's clarity.
Yeah, I'd like to take that spade and bury it.
Hey, that works because a spade's a shovel. We should. I feel like we really need to talk about Huck's dad.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the opening good chunk of the book, right?
Yeah, like the whole first act, really.
Like Huck's impetus for running away is he has a deadbeat, abusive, alcoholic father.
Yeah, who shows up, kidnaps him. And then,
but first he shows up into the widow, like he breaks into the widow's house.
Oh yeah, and he's like, "Give me money."
Well, he says, because Huck's going to school, and he has this whole thing about.
Yeah, he's like, "Don't go to school.
You think you're better than me, kid?" And then he like slaps him and takes his money, and he's like, "I need money." And Huck's like, "Why do you need money?" He's like, "I'm going to the bar."
Yeah.
And it's just like this, like he literally, it's like this generational folly where you would think good parents. Or good ancestors want to see their lineage advance.
Do better, yeah.
And this guy's like,
no,
I'm embarrassed because I know I'm.
Yeah, I'm a loser, and so you need to be more of a loser than me. Yeah.
I think the direct quote is, "You're not better than your father."
Yeah.
And you always can't, like, that's an ethical lesson. You can be better than your father.
And that's a good ethical lesson, right? We're supposed to see that, and just like the Duke and the King, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We want to do the opposite of that.
And there's a lot of inner small town politics between like the widow wants to keep Huck Finn, but the dad says no, I'm going to be the best guardian, and like they're like, I don't want to even get into that can of worms. There's a lot about adoption and fostering in there, but essentially the dad kidnaps Huck Finn, takes him to a remote island. Huck Finn's having a blast because he's just fishing and hunting, but like their diet is literally just catfish and maybe venison, with no seasoning, and then the dad spends any dime they encounter on
more alcohol.
And Huck eventually, like, his dad wakes up in a drunken stupor, tries to kill him. And Huck's like, maybe I
gotta get out.
And so he does this elaborate hoax. Where he like kills a boar. And like stains everything in blood.
And is like, I'm dead.
Yeah, and
almost like reverse Joseph from the Bible.
Yeah.
Like I wonder if there's some influence there.
I don't know.
It's like, my clothes are covered in goat blood. Here you go. Yeah.
But the dad is secretly the wolf.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know.
Editing Zac here. For anyone unfamiliar with the story of Joseph, his brothers sell him into slavery and then convince his father that he's dead by tearing his robe and dipping it in the blood of an animal.
Anyways, but...
Because in both times, like, Jacob identifies the clothes of Joseph, and he's the dad, so maybe... I don't know. It might just be like a
maybe
loose...
we're reading too much.
Yeah, it might just be a loose, like, illusion kind of thing.
Art imitates art.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, but, like, the main takeaway here is you can be a better man than your father, right? And the dad pretends that he's civilized, and like we were talking about that barbaric veneer of lordship. He summons that ethos up to protect himself, but in reality, he's stealing money from his child. He's hurting Huck Finn, and he's enabling himself to continue his addictions.
Yep.
And like I think we're supposed to see this where like, well, that guy is an idiot. Like I think you're supposed to have this visceral reaction.
Yeah.
And you're like, what a loser.
Yep.
But at the time, but like they make references to like, well, at least he's not like an African American though.
Right.
And then you have conversely like Jim, who actually takes good care of Huck.
Yeah.
And is kind to Huck.
And his goal as a father, right? We find out he's a father. His goal is not to run away, but actually to get money to come back for his family.
Right.
Yeah.
And so who actually is more civilized?
Yeah. Who's actually the better father?
This civilized air quotes guy who,
who's beating his own son,
drinking himself silly.
Yep.
Or, this uncivilized.
Yep.
Brute. And I use that word and it's dangerous, right? But like if you're in that time period, that's what language. You think.
Yeah.
And I guess this is also a good time to say, for ethics' sake, when you read this book, there's a lot of historic language, right? It's not a PG book.
No.
There are words that I will not utter here.
Right.
But like if you read it, you just got to know like those are historic words.
Yep.
That is how they would be used. And if they make your skin crawl, they should.
Yep.
It's supposed to make, and I think Samuel Clemens, even back then,
I think that was part of the point. Because there's a lot of language. Yeah,
it is heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And I think Mark Twain wanted it to be uncomfortable.
He wants you to uncomfortable. I think that's the idea. Is you're supposed to be uncomfortable reading the story because it's a weird mix of heavy themes and comical stories and
I have to wonder if that's like part of it.
Yeah.
Where like we're talking about this veneer. Like you're supposed to look under the surface.
And that's the whole point. You have to look under the surface.
And like literally this book sounds like it would be super lighthearted. It's an adventure of a kid and a dude on a raft floating down the river.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned VeggieTales. There's a VeggieTales episode about this.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. We'll just leave it at that. But
is there a hairbrush?
No, there's no hairbrush.
Okay, that's good.
But there's a raft, and I think in that one, Huck Finn wants to be a tax auditor, which is kind of funny because he hates school in the actual book, but creative license, I guess.
Well, it's like, when you go to like, children's church and like you have the story of Noah and the flood and they're like, and it was all sunshine and rainbows and there were a bunch of animals on a boat and it's really cute.
We're like, what happened to all the people? Don't worry.
We don't ask that.
Don't worry about that. We don't have a picture on our flannel graph for that, so it didn't happen.
Yeah. It's like the same vibe. But that's an ethical lesson. There's one other one that I really want to get to, but do you have another one?
For ethical lesson, let's see, we talked about valuing people,
folly,
the whole folly and wisdom. I mean, that shows up in so many there's so many things. I think there's a good ethical lesson between Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. Which Tom
Sawyer is a side character.
Yeah, so and he doesn't come up a whole lot. He's only in like, I don't know, maybe 4 chapters of the whole book.
But I guess it's worth noting, technically, this is like a spinoff from Tom Sawyer.
From the Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
Huck Finn is a
that side character
in Tom Sawyer's story, but Tom Sawyer...
like role reversal here.
And Tom is actually pretty essential for the conclusion of the book.
Yes.
But anyways.
But Tom, while being kind of more of an idealist and definitely wants to like things to happen just like the storybooks, he's not really living in practical life very much. But he holds to Huck Finn. Like there's a lot of loyalty there. And he helps Jim because Huck is helping Jim.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of foolishness because he wants these big extravagant adventures.
Yeah, everything's got to be
his books.
Yes,
and so there's like crusades and pirates and treasure, and he's telling his friends like there are literally 1 million Muslim soldiers camped outside,
and everyone's like, no.
He's like, they got elephant? No, guys, there's elephants. Don't you see the battle elephant?
Exactly. And I think it's interesting because like Tom Sawyer has the education which none of his friends have.
Yeah.
But he's not always using that
for good.
He's
using it for mischievousness. Whereas Huck Finn,
I
guess is a good way to segue. Huck Finn does not have the education.
Yeah, the intelligence maybe,
And
but
he knows it's wrong.
Yeah.
But he's good-hearted, like, at his core.
Yep.
He's got all this gnarly stuff happen to him. But he's still good-hearted. And, like, there's this strong dialogue where, like, there's the breaking point. We talked about it earlier where he can turn Jim in. Like, there is this runaway slave hunting group that is looking for Jim.
Yep.
And he could turn him in. And there's even a reward attached and all these things.
And he would get fame and
he could go back home. Well, I don't know if he'd go back home.
He wouldn't go back home.
But he would probably
he would have money and, you know,
And he has this internal dialogue that's really humanly insightful where he's like, well, my heart says turning Jim in is wrong. My brain says that my culture says turning him in is correct.
Yep.
But I know in my heart that's wrong. And he says, well, crap, I've basically been a rule breaker my whole life.
Like, I've never liked the culture anyway.
It's not even the culture. It's like, if I'm so bad at breaking the rules, why stop now?
Yeah.
And afterwards, there's a little aside where he's reflecting on not turning Jim in. He's like, well, I realized, like, if I did either, I'm going to feel bad for different reasons, and I'd feel worse for turning Jim in, so I'm going to stop caring.
Yeah.
What he gets to, but I think Mark Twain he's writing and he's letting us know, like, you don't have to have this PhD level of education. You have to be a rocket scientist to know that keeping someone in chains is wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to know that. You don't have to, like, necessarily have an education to know that withholding an education from someone is wrong. And then the subtweet of that is, you know, especially if they're a different color. And that's why you're holding them down, if their ethnicity is different.
That's not a good reason.
Yeah.
Yep.
Likewise, like, there's this really... There's some, like, I actually got emotional. You remember when Jim is talking about Solomon?
Yeah.
I thought that was a very beautiful scene.
Yep.
I can't really put my thumb on it.
Quest for wisdom and And
he talks about how, like, Solomon is held up as this paragon of virtue. And Jim, you know, rightly so, points out, he's like, he has like 1,000 wives. He's like, I hardly can handle one.
Yeah.
He's like, what a Dumbo.
Yep.
He's like, you know, this is the guy that's the wisest of all men.
Yeah.
And he's pointing that out, and, you know, Huck doesn't really know how to respond.
Yep.
And so we're seeing that this guy who has been withheld education is wiser.
He's got wisdom,
than everyone else.
Yep.
And I think those are actually closely, like, I think they're, if I remember
connected.
right, they're connected in the book.
Yeah, they are.
In the dialogue between choosing what's right because it is truly, like, practically good.
Yeah.
Rubbing against what societally you're told is good.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's wisdom in that. And using Solomon to say, like, yeah, he's held up at this paragon of virtue, and he did ask for wisdom, and that was good.
Yep.
But he also exercised folly.
Yep.
And he fell. And I think just that the main ethic is just wisdom and folly, and it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
But I actually got teary-eyed when he was talking about Solomon, and that, you know, where Huck Finn says, well, if I knew I'm bad at, you know, I'm good at breaking rules to begin with, and I'm bad at following them, why start now?
Right.
And just, there's something Mark Twain does that's excellent in that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was like a
Mike
Wazowski monologue.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like it. But I think that's probably good for ethical lesson, right?
I'm going to move on.
Okay, let's go to clear conflict and resolution. I think it's good. It's just, I don't know what... Like, there's a moral conflict that Huck goes through a little bit later on once he meets Jim, and I think that's resolved because he helps Jim get away.
Yeah.
And Jim finds his way to Ohio.
We don't know how he ends up, do we?
Not really. I don't think.
I think he just kind of...
Because we're kind of following Huck Finn, so once he leaves Huck, it's like we don't really know anything about him after that. So, like, physically, the plot line, the conflict is... Huck escapes from both the widow and his father and finds Jim and helps Jim, and then does he end up back?
Doesn't Tom's aunt
Tom's aunt adopts him.
Does Tom get shot?
Yeah.
Doesn't that happen?
Yeah, but he's okay.
And they pass where, like, Huck is, like, his cousin. There's, like, this weird...
Well, first Huck pretends to be Tom.
And then
Tom pretends to be Tom's cousin.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they're like, actually, we were just Josh.
I'm his real mother. And that boy's not related to me, but I'll take him.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's not, like, And I have to wonder, like, Jim's plot is left purposefully, I think, unsatisfactory.
Correct. We're
And
like, okay, well, he made it to Ohio, I guess, but we don't know what happens to him. Did he go back and get his family? We don't know.
And if you're reading as a contemporary, like, consumer, like a reader in 1880, like, it's kind of up to you.
Yeah.
Like, what happens
How do
to
you
Jim?
choose that story?
Like,
Yep.
It is.
Choose
what are
your
you
own
gonna do?
ending. Yeah.
And those are always powerful in my mind.
Yep. I think that's good. So yeah, I think it does a decent job. What about engaging and relatable characters?
I like them, but like I was telling Zach, they're not.
We've looked at stories like this before, like Leaf by Niggle, or I'm trying to think of some of the other stories where the characters are stand-ins for other ideas or tropes. Yeah. And Huck Finn, The Adventures of Huck Finn is kind of doing a similar idea, which we've talked about a little bit already with the civilizedness.
The city people, like there's
like the widow is every
genteel,
every civilized Southern person that has their own ideas of what's civilized, but may not actually be.
You got the Hatfield McCoy family versus McCoy family.
Exactly. There's this blood
Southern
feud.
honor.
Yep.
Like
the con men. Yep.
Vagabonds taking a buck where they can. Like it's just all of these individuals. They represent elements of American culture.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so because of that, to me, it's deeply relatable. Like Huck Finn himself is a paragon of like American culture, right? Somewhat uncivilized, but he's given the opportunity to become civilized.
And
the subtweet is like you actually need both. Like he needs to know how to fish and hunt to survive. He needs to thrive in the outdoors. But he also does need to know how to operate in civilization. And so like those are basically because like they're deeply American virtues and ethics. And Jim's the same way, right? But we've gone in depth about what he represents. And if you can't pick it up, then like you just need some aging to do and maybe read a history book. But for those reasons, I find them relatable because they teach me something about American history and society.
No, that's good. I think that's good. What about Captivating World?
I love the Mississippi River. Like, you just think about the Spanish moss.
I really do get the whole Mississippi River vibe, and I think he does a great job describing it. I think he does a good job with that journey. Like, I see it. Like, in my mind, I see this kind of almost like the river branches off with its different tributaries. I feel like as we're going along the river plot-wise, we're branching off with these little tributaries and then coming back to the river, right? We just keep coming back to the river, and I can like
it's a hub.
See it in my mind.
And like you said, it literally is pushing them in the plot. But I mean, you got like steamboats.
Which is
people
so
are talking
cool.
about like, caps and flintlock muskets and they just got the vibe. And it's because they lived it. Mark Twain was living the vibe. So to him, like if we lived back then, would it be Captivating World to us?
Maybe.
I doubt it.
I mean, we've talked about that before. Like, is writing in the current time period always captivating? Sometimes,
but like for us looking back, like it does look like a slice of life. Like
it's like when you go to a museum and you see like everything, and you're like, oh, this is what it looks like back then.
How the judge interacts with Huck's dad, and the church, the Christian church, and how it operates back then. All of it it fits so smoothly.
Yeah, so I think it does. I think it does a good job. What about consistency?
I think it's even better than Captivating World. Like nothing breaks.
Nothing breaks.
Well, I mean, a lot of things break.
Well, but like in the cohesion of the world, right? Even the darkness of the story, like we've talked about,
consistent.
It's consistent, and it makes sense in the time period. It makes sense in the plot, and the resolutions that happen, and the goodness and the light that happens. That's not breaking with the narrative or with the story as well. It makes sense, right? And we see the good and the bad, and it fits together.
Yeah, I mean, like they talk about how does Huck survive, and like he literally is eating wild strawberries, catfish, and the occasional hunk of meat from something else he's able to hunt. And they talk about how like they need money to buy other things. Like it's just it's well lived in. You get a couple elements of like supernatural, like voodoo-y type things, and that does some good consistent world building because it's accurate to our. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is, I have no gripes with consistency
Right.
in this.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, it's a pretty positive take that we have on it because there's a reason that this book has stayed around as a classic. Anytime we review something that has a lot of history behind it, there's a reason that it has that kind of history behind it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, we'll also probably do these deep dives if we ever read like the Aeneid or the Odyssey or David and Goliath.
Yep.
And, there's a lot of historic unpacking that you have to do to understand what
to understand the story. Absolutely.
If you read anything with an American understanding, then it better be like an American written thing from this time period that we live in.
Yep.
But it was like simultaneously soothing and filling me with strife.
Right.
I listened to it. So every time I listened to it, it like filled me with dread, but also was like a very relaxing.
Yeah.
It's very
mixed.
combo.
It's very mixed. Yeah. Oh yeah. We encourage you to read it, but it's very, very mixed. But as we're coming to the end, Josh, what would you give it? Final rating for the tier chart.
I mean, it's an A. It's solid. Like I know why they teach this in school. I agree with the reasons it's taught in schools. I would encourage people to read it today still for the same reasons it was written back then. It's deeply American. Yeah, which I'm obviously a fan of. It's very American. Good and ill. Like there's beautiful American parts and there's harder American parts. So
it's not sugarcoating it. It's not whitewashing it. It's
I think I learned something reading it even as an adult. Again, I mean, I read it in school, but that was years ago. Yeah. And so
this was a good one for me too. It's been a while since I've read it, and it was more. I think I got more out of it this time than I did the last time, and which is good.
And it's because of the stuff we're talking about. I think you have to be an adult to
once
pick
you live.
up on.
Yeah, once you live life a little bit, once you realize history and society and the things that have happened, your view of people. Yeah. I'm similar. I think I would give it a B somewhere in there, B plus. So it's good. It's an above average good story. It really is. So we put those together, we come around to like an A minus. Yep. Yeah. So that's where it'll be when you're looking at that tier chart. It's going to be an A. It's a good story that we recommend. Absolutely, a nice breather, both in severity and in lightheartedness from Transformers.
Yeah, that was kind of jarring.
It somehow manages to be darker and lighter
at the same time. And they both work better.
Yes,
they're both like very artistically.
Yeah, that's a word.
My English just shut down.
Yeah.
Anyways, but they're artistically done.
Yep.
And they both make more sense than Transformers ever did.
Yep.
But we're supposed to stay positive.
Yeah,
so we gotta apologize for our residual disdain.
I will not apologize.
I will not comply.
So Josh, what are we talking about next week?
Wait a second.
I'm sorry. I'm skipping ahead.
You know who did comply, Zach?
Yeah, sorry. Oof. We have some other Patreon members
who complied to our request for more likes and subs.
That's right.
So if you thought that the paid members were all, you'd be wrong.
Yeah.
So we want to give a huge shout out to Katie Loves. Well, actually, it's Katie _loves_ HP.
That's right.
Gee, I wonder what that is.
Probably
hippopotamus poodoo. Or
that is not a thing.
HP
hippopotamus.
No, it's another one. Harry.
Honey phylacticus.
Oh, good. Honey pterodactyls.
Honey pterodactyls.
Hairy pterodactyls.
I mean,
anyways,
that's fair. Do pterodactyls have hair? I feel like no.
I heard that.
Although there's a mix, because I'm pretty sure the scientific community is debating lizards versus birds right now.
Ready for this though?
On dinosaurs, yeah.
It might be a hairy wizard.
A hairy wizard.
But we also want to give a shout.
You're a dinosaur, Harry.
Hagrid's also pretty hairy.
Hagrid's, yeah, that's true.
Also want to give a big shout out to In Great 08.
Yep.
I don't know what made 2008 so great,
but maybe it
punk
was
rock.
Yeah, punk rock.
That's when like the boys, we all had like the spiky hair, and like swept it over your face.
Yeah, it's not. I feel like it's a good time frame. I always liked mid 2000s.
That was like towards like, you know, still good cinema, but
Yeah.
we can tell it's declining.
It was shifting. It was definitely shifting. Yeah.
But
that's a whole debate or a whole discussion.
That might be a bonus Patreon
if you want
episode.
to, if you want us to do a bonus episode on like trends in movies, that would be huge. I got a lot to say on that.
Probably can't go too far back. But in grade 08, you're great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now.
And if you want to continue to make our podcast great, not just in 2008, but in 2024, then you should comment on these episodes, and you should share us on Instagram, Facebook, all of the places where you share podcasts. Listen to us on YouTube. Give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and all the places where you get your podcasts. It would be a huge help.
And a blessing. So what are we talking about next time, Zach?
I'm vengeance.
I can't do the Batman theme song.
No?
I can't do it.
I don't know.
I guess that's it, though.
How does it go? The new one. We're going to do the new one with Robert
Sparkly
Pattinson.
Edward.
Yeah. Sparkly
Sparkly Batman.
Batman the Vampire.
I'm sure that exists.
Vampire Bat. Pretty sure that's a villain, actually. Isn't Vampire Bat is a villain?
I think it's in Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
All right, that's it.
Bye.
Come back later. I don't agree.
I think it's just a trope. I don't know if it has any.
But it is like old. I think even the Greeks did that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's huge. Yeah. It's just a trope, I think.
All right. Well, let's get back.
Yep. It's just a trope.
It's getting weirder the farther down Google.
Yeah, I don't want to keep going down that path. All right.
Anyways.